I'm pleased to welcome you to our 4th annual Kelleher Forum. This special forum is something that we do every year in early March to honor Catherine McArdle Kelleher, who was one of our 4 original faculty members who established our school, the first director of CISSM, and the founder of Women in International Security. Catherine laid the groundwork for all of us to be here today and paved the way for half of us to be taken seriously in the field of security policy in a way that very few women were in the 1960s when Catherine was a graduate student at MIT. Catherine was truly fearless. If she saw something that needed to be done, she figured out a way to do it, even if nobody else had ever done that type of thing before. I think that's a really good spirit for all of us to emulate today. Catherine founded CISSM in the mid-1980s when the Reagan administration was in office and people lived in constant fear that the superpowers would unleash a global nuclear war. The Reagan administration was very ideological and anti-intellectual, but Catherine was convinced that she could get the superpower leaders to make better decisions by creating a place where academics from many different disciplines and countries could pool their knowledge and produce reports written so that policymakers would want to read them. Catherine made that vision a reality and had the policy impact she hoped for, eventually serving in the Clinton administration as it tried to build a better security order in Europe after the Cold War. If she could do that, we can too. Catherine was also an incredibly kind person who went out of her way to help women and men realize their potential in the security policy field. She helped me through a difficult time in my professional life in the 1990s and served as my mentor after I came to CISSM in the early 2000s. That's one of the reasons why we've set up a fellowship in her honor so that we can help outstanding graduate students, particularly non-traditional ones, get the education they need to do innovative research, find creative ways to solve intractable problems, and use those insights to make the world more peaceful, equitable, and kind. When we were talking a year ago about who we would ideally like to have as our next Kelleher Forum speaker, several of my colleagues suggested Sue Gordon. We were thrilled when she accepted our invitation and immediately started spreading the word. When somebody from the IC who was close to Catherine heard who we had chosen, she said, "Sue Gordon is more like Catherine than anyone else I know." A number of my other friends and colleagues with intelligence backgrounds have literally raved about how wonderful Sue Gordon is. One of them told me that she is more revered, beloved, and respected now than anyone else in the IC. So I think it's wonderful that the rest of us have the opportunity to meet this legendary person. Let me tell you just a couple of things about her, and then she's going to tell you a whole lot more about herself, her unlikely path to the top of the intelligence community, and lessons about life and leadership she draws from her career. The Honorable Sue Gordon was Deputy Director of National Intelligence from 2017 to 2019. You can do the math and figure out who she was briefing and how that person was probably reacting. Before that, Sue was the Deputy Director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency from 2015 to 2017. She helped that organization through a massive transformation to adapt to a rapidly changing security and intelligence environment. Leadership and organizational change during difficult time periods is a recurring theme in Sue's career. She graduated from college in 1980 and couldn't find a job in her chosen field, So she became a Soviet missile analyst for the CIA, doing her own small part to keep the superpowers from starting a nuclear war when Catherine was founding CISSM. Sue knows firsthand how individuals and organizations can be resilient, adapt to change, and find opportunities to achieve better outcomes than anyone could envision during the darkest part of a transitional process. Another reason why I invited Sue to talk with you today is because of our shared interest in multi-stakeholder governance. You would think that the intelligence community is the last place in the world that would be into multi-stakeholder governance. But Sue was smart enough to understand the importance of cross-sector collaboration and innovation to keep one step ahead of threats in a complex, rapidly changing, tightly interconnected world. She led the establishment of In-Q-Tel, the Central Intelligence Agency's venture arm, in the 1990s. And in the last several years, she has focused on advancing intelligence integration across the IC and on expanding outreach and partnerships to the private sector and international allies. I think that Sue is the best possible person to be speaking to us all at this moment because she knows how to maintain professional integrity and continue trying to provide the best possible intelligence so leaders can make informed decisions even when they don't seem very interested in what experts have to say or hearing information that contradicts pre-existing preferences and views. I'm also hoping that she will share her secrets about how to maintain your composure, your optimism, and your willingness to try new things even when you have absolutely no idea how everything will turn out.
Well, thanks so much. That was lovely. Aren't you kind? I was lobbying for a bio that said, "This is Sue. She's old, grateful, and lucky." Um, and I actually think that's when I heard it. That's what I heard. I'm so glad to be here, and let's just talk about just 2 seconds to be part of the Kelleher 4th annual event. Man, this woman was ahead of her time, and what she represents is exactly what we need now. This notion of interdisciplinary, and we are still in our nascence of really, as a society and as a national security community, really understanding what that means. We are overly stovepiped kind of across the board, particularly in the area of technology, where it's still the technologists who are doing something and then the political scientists that are doing the same things. And I kind of get that because for so long, technological advantage was our stock in trade, and now it's less so, and it's more about making it work. And Catherine was about making it work, right? She was as expert as it came, but she was no ideologue, and there was a practicality to her that I think is really relevant. She was indomitable. And I will also say, as a woman who achieved the things that she so clearly did, she reminds me that in times of need, even a system that is biased against you will choose someone who can do something over the look they prefer. Right? So if you want to know, and the movie Hidden Figures, you all have seen that and know of it? The way I say it is, how is it possible in the 1950s and 60s that black women put us on the moon? And the answer is because we needed to go to the moon. And so just to that issue of her indomitability and fighting as being a woman, I bet she was aware of it, but what she was thinking those were the things she could do. And she hit an environment where if something needed to be done, it was the thing that you chose, if not. So I'm so proud to be a part of that. Listen, we're going to do a little bit of choose your own adventure. So let me do an opening soliloquy, and then there are just a whole bunch of things we can talk about, and it really depends on you, and we'll probably talk about all of them. But let me tell you, I'm an optimist. And if you listen to Nancy talk about my career, you say, well, of course, Of course she's an optimist. She's the third kid of a naval officer with no discernible skills who went to Duke to become a marine biologist, but ended up playing basketball so that the Marine Science Consortium, where she would have learned to be a marine biologist, was not available to her in the springtime. So she got a degree in zoology, but when she went to graduate, she couldn't decide if she was going to get her PhD or go to law school because she really likes to argue. So she got a job as a CIA doing analysis of Soviet biological warfare. But it was 1980, which you so aptly described, and it was, in addition to all the things you said, the intelligence community was getting smaller. And so I show up at 21 years old with my shiny new security clearance, and I'm told that job is gone and you have 30 days to find work. And so with my degree in zoology, I decided, well, of course, zoology is the parent discipline of mechanical engineering, so I can do settle down. Where else are there frictionless joints other than in babies' knees? And it is the perfect discipline for intelligence because intelligence is an inductive science. And that is everything you see is doing what it's doing perfectly. Your job is not to judge it, but to understand it, and that's very good for intelligence. So I do that, and somewhere along the way, I get to do analysis of Soviet weapons, and I built US spacecraft and then sensor systems, and then became the person you hired if you wanted something done. So I got into information technology before it was cool. Got into cyber, left for 8 years to finish raising my children, started In-Q-Tel, did cyber, got to go to NGA. And so, of course, I'm an optimist because how in the world did I get there? So I must be an optimist. But I will tell you that if you knew the rest of the story behind that, you would say, how in the world can she possibly be an optimist? Though I married the love of my life, I recently lost him early. I've suffered personal loss. I've had cancer. I was unceremoniously fired for no reason whatsoever by the President of the United States and very publicly trolled on social media. I never got a job I knew how to do. And yet here I am still smiling, saying I'm an optimist. And the answer is resilience is something you build by just trying to do things. So my goal for you all is to leave today with the confidence that I have that if you believe you're always becoming, that it'll all work out in the end, because if it hasn't worked out, it doesn't have to be the end. And if you as an individual are always becoming, if you as a leader of an organization is always becoming, if we as a society are always becoming, then though we will be in hardship just like we were when I grew up and we had to do duck and cover drills because we were sure that global thermonuclear war was right around the corner, or if you were walking downtown on September 12th, you were sure that you would never look up without seeing a plane auguring in. If it was 2016 and you knew about Russian interference, you wouldn't believe that we could ever learn enough about that in order for the American people to have any confidence in their elections, and look how many people vote. So we have been through hard times. This is another turn of those times, but if you're always becoming, if you own the space that you have, and you don't stop, we will get through this one as well. So here's what I kind of have in mind, is talk about the moment in which we find ourselves, because I actually believe that moments are the most important things to both recognize and use. And so I will offer to you that this is one of those moments, and we can talk about that. And I'll wrap up in there some geopolitics if we want to talk about that. Then I'll talk about innovation, because we talk about innovation as though it's a thing you do or intend to. Nah. Innovation comes when the conditions in which you operate have changed and you must do things differently than you did them when you designed your system before. So we can talk about how you actually practically think about change and lead it. And because as I said, I had a whole series of jobs I didn't know how to do. I'm actually a very practiced innovator, and I can give you the handy-dandy skill set. And then I'll offer some leadership lessons if it helps, and then we can just talk about the moment. So any of those sound interesting to you? Is there something you were hoping I'd talk about that I didn't mention? Okay, we're good? Okay, so the moment in which we found ourselves, you kind of heard my soliloquy. We as a nation have been through a lot, just in my very short lifetime, a lot of really profound changes. And while it didn't feel like we could when we were in them, we actually have managed to find a way through all of them. So this is a particular moment. I'm going to tell you my version of what characterizes it, and why I think it's so different. If you want to look this up, there's a TED talk by a guy named Eddie Obing, and it's about 10 years old. You can look up Eddie Obing and After Midnight, and you'll find it. And here's his, it's really much more delightful than I'm going to say. Here's his thesis. We all went to bed one night, and sometime after midnight, the whole world changed. And when we woke up in the morning, it looked exactly the same, but nothing we had done before worked. Isn't that kind of the way it feels? Like all the things that the world looks the same, but nothing is working. And here are some of the reasons I think that's true. Number one is, I mentioned it on technology. This is a world where every technology is available to everyone, and the one that puts it to clever use faster is the one that wins. But countries like America, with a huge installed base who have been using things for a long time, how easy is it for us to change? New entrants into the market with that same technology can do things faster than we can do it. When the American people talk about us being too slow, when the private sector talks about why won't they buy new weapon systems faster, it's because our system has been doing this for so long that we have ways that we prefer to do it. So this notion of, oh, you wanted it to work, how you use things, not just have things, how you talk about things, not just for their characteristics, but for the outcome that they affect, is a really important moment. And if you think about the classes you have and the conversations you have, we are still talking about a lot of things. If I think about what's so hard about this moment from a political perspective in America, that's exactly what we're struggling right now. We know that our systems are not good enough for the moment. But we keep on thinking if we bring in someone from the private sector, they can make it a business, right? Or we buy the right thing, it'll work. And the answer is, this is much harder, is how do we produce the outcome we want? And I would encourage you, when you're listening to the news and you're hearing all this stuff, don't choose a side. Listen for what the outcome is, and then watch to see whether that outcome is being achieved. And then you, as leaders and or future leaders, will remember that that's what you should be focusing, not the activity that gets you headlines. So this notion of a world where everything exists for everyone but uses what makes advantage makes this world really different. And that coupled with the fact that it is a digital world, not a physical world now, right? If you think about it in historic terms, and you think about how lucky the United States is because of the geography we were gifted by our ancestors, that was advantageous because distance was our tool. We had technology to be able to cover theirs, but they couldn't cover ours. Well, now, digitally, any distance can be covered in no time for no money. And even worse, the boundaries between institutions and organizations that we believe in can be crossed by our adversaries and competitors, and we can't do anything about it because we don't believe that we should stop those who are breaking into the things that our government can't get into. So really interesting when you have a digitally connected world. It is super fast. It is really accessible. It has huge volumetric features to it. And most of all, it has a huge impact on the impedance mismatch between decision making and availability of decisions to be made. And so when you have a government trying to come in and help it, Tamir Pardo, the former head of the Mossad, told me one day, he said, the problem is a good decision today is a bad decision tomorrow, and it takes us 2 weeks to make decisions. And I said, 2 weeks? And he said, so when the paper is put in front of the decision maker, it's insufficient, not because it was bad work, but because the whole world has changed in that time. So let's think about democracy which is fundamentally about decision making that is in some ways the sub-optimization of the individual for the good of the group. How do you do that at digital speed? So you think about things that change in this digital world. The other thing that changes, and this is from a geopolitical perspective, allies and partnerships are no longer based on military and political protection. With digital world, you see the rise of pesky sovereignty, and you see that alliances are based on more economic things than others. And economic considerations are more situational than political military. So we are super frustrated because America's great strength has always been that we had friends and partners. And yet this is a world where the UK can't decide if they're willing to take Chinese telecom out of their systems because of the economic impact what will be if China gets mad at them. 30 years ago, we couldn't have imagined that the UK would be like, I don't know, I think I'm going to go that way. And if you take this moment with Ukraine and what's going on with who are we partnering with, what pressures do we put on, whether they're through tariffs or negotiation for peace, it should be obvious who people will align with, but now they don't have to have only one choice. They can say, well, man, I have a lot of needs like a deep water port, and the United States isn't going to buy it for me, but China will. So a world order that has existed since World War II that said we kind of understood what these centers of power are, I think has been thrown up in the air. And there are two centers of power, China and Russia, who have decided what their positioning is, and the only people who have decided what ours is us. And how does that work? And can we force it back into existence with physical, military, and political protection? Or is there something else that we have to do? So this digital interconnectedness is huge. And the other thing it's done is that the threat surface is now not confined to the government. And what that means is the predominant national security decision makers in the world today are not sitting in the government. They're the private citizens who are deciding what information they're going to be influenced by and consume, and the companies who are deciding what they build or don't build today based on efficiency because they presume that the security will be there, not recognizing that they're the ones that are deciding whether we're going to do it. So technology versus use, digital versus physical, and then the third thing is it's a world of data abundance. Now, I'm a former intelligence officer. You would think that a world of data abundance would be, woohoo, right? More data. It's either bane or boon. It is only boon if we know what to do with it. Do you think the intelligence community knows what to do with all the information the world has? Have you followed along with their wringing their hands over what should we do about open source? Is that really our job, or is that CNN's job? If 1947 didn't exist, and we only thought of intelligence right now, do you think they'd have problems wondering what to do? They'd go, oh my God. We don't need to be hunters anymore, we can be gatherers, and that's where advantage will lie. And I'm not even sure that secrecy is as much of an advantage today as it used to be, so I'm probably going to unburden myself from secrecy. This is a great time to be you. I'm listening to myself talk, and I'm just giving you so many problems that are waiting for you to solve, because all of those things will be. Right? All of them will be. The question is, who's going to be the person that says, I know what to do about it? And not because they're a dilettante and mad that their boss is stupid, but because they own some space that allows them to do some piece of that problem in order to go forward. So we can talk more, and we'll leave lots of time for questions. We can talk kind of the geopolitical situation. If you want, we can talk about where the threats really lie. Anyone have an opinion about the greatest threat America faces right now? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Here's what I told the president, right? Yes, sir.
China?
Big, important. Huge threat. I like them more as a threat because we're so intertwined economically that I feel like we have more levers if we can figure out how to use them, not in the way that Nixon did in '72 when he thought if we just brought them in that they'd see their way to our system. Huge, huge issue. No, I think the biggest threat to America is that we'll stop believing in ourselves. And so then the question is, what do we do about that? Because in democracies, default to trust is really important. But our information systems are all under siege. What are you going to do about that? And how are you going to go through that? And how are you going to navigate that? So that's kind of my view of the moment, but this is a great moment. Like, the only thing that makes me sad about leaving the way I did is I wish someone would give me the chance to go back. I would love to go back into the government right now. Doesn't that seem funny? And we'll talk about the challenges of how you do it, even especially in a circumstance like this where, man, it's I was going to say a short show, but it's difficult. But still, it's super exciting. And the other things that I really like about government, well, the great news is that I describe national security, it isn't only governmental anymore. So no one needs to say, I don't know that the government's the right place right now until we figure out what's going on. That isn't the only one. But I will also give a plug for government because I think it has a couple features that are super inspiring. Number one is you need government to solve the big problems that no one else can possibly take on. Pre-World War II, it was the Manhattan Project. The big problems are much bigger now. What are we going to do about education? What are we going to do about national security that was built for a different time, that is now so big? How do we do it? What are we going to do about a populace that is so divided? These are big problems. What do you do about AI? Where market forces alone won't be enough, but too much governance will keep us from advancing. These are big problems. So one is big problems. That's so much fun. The second is, this is awesome. With those big problems come long time horizons. Now, they're not as long as they used to be, but they are longer than that which is driven by market forces. And then the last thing is it has deep pockets. And on top of those three wonderful attributes, here's a really fascinating challenge. It has to be repeatable, transparent, and fair. So this mapping of business onto government is adorable and too simple. Absolutely, we need to find a way to judge whether the things we're doing. The best thing I've learned by being out of the government, working for the private sector, is how focused you have to be in a company. If you want that company to last, you better know exactly what it does and focus on that. Those things are just huge. But to be repeatable, transparent, fair, and take on huge problems, now that is a challenge worth your time. So that's the moment, I think, in which we find ourselves. I think it's resplendent with opportunities. Because I'm a zoologist, I will tell you that these are the moments where all the good things happen. Forgiving me for being someone who is both faith and science, so this example isn't perfect, but the reason why I was sitting here is because back in primeval days, the lakes filled up with tar, and so fishes jumped out of the lakes, and with their really incredibly inefficient gills, but still needing oxygen, that happened, we're happening. So this idea of adversity creating opportunity is really something to embrace. When you're feeling daunted, look for the thing that's there. So that's that. Anyone want to throw a flag on any of that? Yeah, then evolution happened. And then you have fish that jump out, and they are operating on land. And now they're operating on land, and then they've got to develop things to walk on land. Yeah. I'll be having a separate session with my honors thesis on the structural and mechanical analysis of the mesoglia for anyone who's interested. So that's that. Now let's talk about change and innovation, and then I'll wrap up talking about leadership. This really is a time where we have evolved for so long, and we have lived in such relative peace and abundance that we just think that we can keep on using the systems we have. Well, what happens when you can't? And how do you go about imagining how you can change? And this holds true for whether you need to develop a new technology, a new organization, a new structure, or even a new way to affect democracy. Here's the Sue Gordon handy-dandy ways to innovate. First is, you have to really think hard. Like, you have to say, how am I going to do that? What does that really mean? A lot of people, sometimes you'll get a task from a boss to say, come up with something new, change this organization, do that. Never, ever, ever ask questions of your boss when they've given you that task to affect change. You're saying, come on. You can ask one clarifying question about what they mean. But if they do, if you ask a second question, they're going to start lying to you. Because they are going to want to help you, but they haven't done the work. When you have to change something, you must do the work yourself. And the reason why you must do the work yourself, now you can get lots of supporting information to help you decide, but it really has to be you. And the reason why you have to do it is because once you launch on this project, you're going to be wrong, and you're going to have to decide what you must keep and what you can give away. If you're doing someone else's task, if you're just following someone else's prescription, you will have to keep everything, or you won't be very good. So first things first, you have to think. Second thing is, we'll test this out. I don't believe you could get to the future from the present. It's too hard. You're dragging too much stuff with you. You're too bound by all the things that have gone before, all the things you've been taught to believe, all the things that you know are too hard. So the only way you can change is you must jump to the future, figure out what that looks like, and then go backwards and say, well, what are the critical steps? You're saying, surely this can't be right. And yet in the 60s, what did JFK say? By the end of the decade, we're going to put man on the moon and return them safely to the earth. Did they know how to do it? No. Not a clue. But they knew the quest. They jumped to the future, and then they said, what do we have to have in order to do that? It's a really good test. And when that happens, you get Tang and Velcro. Do you all know what Tang and Velcro are? Tang was a powdered drink that came from the space race. Thank you for being in the back row and being somewhere close to my diagram. So when we decided to go to the moon, we got Tang and Velcro. Do you know what we try and do today? Actually, it's what the Silicon Valley way is if you build enough Tang and Velcro, you'll get to the moon. Right? So this idea of jumping to the future to know what it must be is really important. Step number 3 is you have to give up something you believe in. Part of this, you can't drag the whole present with you. The bigger the change, the more you have to be willing. I mentioned I think the CIA has got to consider that advantage isn't secrecy anymore, because I think it's holding them back. It's making them too slow to communicate, not sharing or using enough information. And there are other sources of advantage than that. But that, for them, like huge. When I formed In-Q-Tel, and this was the idea of Silicon Valley wasn't working with the CIA, so we created something sitting outside the agency that would basically be the institution that would take our big problems and then seek for solutions. Here were the 3 things I changed. Number 1, it was unclassified. Now, in 2025, we may not think it's that weird to talk about the CIA's venture arm or the problems they're taking on in a classified form. In 1998, incredibly difficult to change. Second thing we did was we didn't write, the statement of work was 1/2 a page, said these are our 10 big problems, go figure out whether there are things out there that will be useful. We wrote no specifications. All the decision we're making was made by the private sector outside. There was no one on the board of directors from the CIA. The only control the CIA had over that was whether we gave them money each year to go do that. But we didn't specify how it would be done. We would only specify what we needed. And again, that was a big leap. And the third thing we changed was We let the companies own the intellectual property. Again, doesn't seem like a big deal, but back then it was, because all the specialties, we certainly had the private sector doing things for us, but we had owned the intellectual property. They weren't going to play if we didn't, and so we gave that away. And as a result of that, those three big decisions, we have Google Earth and Cloudera and Palantir. Pete Thiel, who is part of the cabal that thinks that the government is wasteful, had he looked at the CIA's budget in 1999 and seen a line that said $30 million for In-Q-Tel, he was like, this shit, kick it out. And yet Palantir wouldn't exist without that. So those were three big things. So if you're gonna innovate, jump to the future, think yourself, be willing to give up things that you always believed in. And then the last one is, don't be persnickety about the team that you bring with you. I've been given the job to do big things over and over, and I always do what everyone does, which is say, I'll take on that big project, but you got to give me the 5 people I need. Because everyone knows the 5 people, right? Everyone knows the 5 best people, I think. And so I would say, I want the 5 best people, because you've given me this huge task, and they're always like, no, sorry. We need you to do the big task, but we're not going to give you the 5 people. So here's who I got on my teams. The person between jobs, the person in the penalty box, the person that doesn't really know what they're doing, and the person that just liked working with me. And those teams did In-Q-Tel, and did In-Q-Tel in 7 months from task to incorporation. That group of people. Later in my career, I was given the job to figure out cyber for the agency. Same thing, give me the 5 people. No, you can't have the 5 people. I got the same same construct of narrow dwells, different humans. And we delivered what is now the modern CIA organization because of that. So when you're going to change, don't be persnickety about who can involve you. We all think that there are only a few. Not true. Anyone you're working with deserves to be there. There is so much excellence all around. It's just over time we kind of fall into traps of doing that. And the last thing I'll tell you, because I think everyone's a leader, but some people think, yeah, the leader stuff's not for me. It looks too hard, particularly now and all that kind of stuff. Here's the way to think about it. When your vision exceeds the resources you personally possess, you must lead. Right? You have to form a team. So as you're going through this and going in. Now, let's talk about some leadership lessons that I think are relevant now. And there might be 11 of them. You all can count, or I'll forget or add. Here's my best shot. Number 1 is you have to be really good. We don't talk nearly enough about how good you need to be in order to be successful. Particularly for women, I think women of my generation have done young women a disservice by telling them that they're walking into a biased environment. Man, in 1980, 21 opened the door to my first office, and this guy goes, hey, babe, want to jump into a hot tub and redefine morality? To which the only appropriate answer is not with you. But I didn't think 2 seconds about the difficulty of being in a minority. I was just focusing on being good, and the truth was it was actually an advantage to me because I was more seen. And so if I was good, I was better. Okay, there was a downside if you were bad, the worse, and we have to fix all that. But this idea of being good, that really is where it starts. I wish organizations had a soul. I really do. I wish they cared enough about you to want good for you or to do you harm truthfully. They're just trying to get a job done. And if you're someone who can do it, Catherine, the women of Hidden Figures, chances are you can do it. So don't be put off by what someone tells you about the biases are. Just remember what Sue told you. Of all the things happening in an organization, 2% are trying to help you, 3% are trying to do you harm, and the other 95% you're just intersecting. And no organization has enough energy to stop someone who does. So be really good. Second thing is, this is the best one. Own your space. Whether you are a singleton 21-year-old doing Soviet missile analysis because you couldn't do biological warfare, own your space. Don't look about the meetings you can get into. Don't worry whether your boss is a jerk. Own your space. Because that is your domain, and you can do anything with that because no one else is doing anything with it but you. I always said if you gave me the job of sweeping the parking lot at CIA headquarters, I would have redefined communications because I was looking at the antennas on the roof. If you have space, no one can do that. But here's the trick. You will be good, but you want to be successful? The good is your nose down. And it applies if you're a leader too. Your craft changes at what you have to be good at, but it's still the same thing. But you got to keep your nose down to be good, and you got to have your head up to be successful. Right? And what I mean by that is, and when I was at NGA, my first day there, I said, so tell me, what does NGA do? And someone says, we do imagery and mapping. And I said, no, you do national security. Right? Because there's the job we do and there's the thing we're doing. And why that duality is important and why it gives you so much power and why it actually is the key to every bit of change is you know more about the space you're in than anyone else. And if you're always watching for how it is applied back to the what the outcome is rather than the thing is, who's going to be best positioned to know whether it needs to change, it needs to persist, or it needs to go away. And the people that have the most knowledge are the ones that are making the recommendations. The organization knows what to do with this. So this idea of owning your space is super important, and it applies whether you're a singleton or whether you're the Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence. 2 examples. I was the Director of Support at the CIA. CIA Director of Support is the most badass job. It's so cool. It's all support. About half the people at the CIA are in support, and it's all finance, logistics, security, facilities, medical, IT, human resources. Amazing job. And 3 times, because you have to do it openly, clandestinely, and covertly. You're responsible for everything worldwide. And the best thing is, it's a really complex problem, but it's tractable. It's not like, oh man, how am I going to know what's in Putin's head? That's intractable, but this is complex and you can do it. It was a great job. But my first day on the job, this new CIO came in and said, hey, that was just a policy job. I'd like to take your best 3,000 people that do IT and I'd like them to bring you over to my shop. And I said, absolutely not. Said, the boss kind of wants it. I'm like, well, the boss just gave me this job, and so they're not going to take it away from me. But I went ahead and did the study about whether it made any sense, and it wasn't going to make any sense. Support as an integrated unit was a much better answer to support. And you can't give me the job if I say over my dead body, because you always get one request when you're in a new job, right? You all know this. Right? And I'm like, okay, I can do the over my dead body. Would that have been a good solution to the only reason why we didn't do anything? Never a good solution. So I gave it away because even though I thought my solution was slightly better, it could work that way. And so I owned my space and I called it all hands. I said, you're moving because it's the right thing. Don't worry. You're the people that are the magic. It doesn't matter whether you're here or there. And it worked out fine. That's owning my space. Fast forward to when I'm the Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence and the President says, I want a Space Force. And the DOD says, sweet, land grab. And the Congress says we can make it neat and we'll take the National Reconnaissance Office that's in the intelligence community and we'll put it together with the DOD. And I said, no, absolutely not. Now, how are those two things different? Right? Why didn't I just give away the NRO like I had given away the thing? And the answer is, I own my space. And while the first, it could work that way, in the second, I knew that it couldn't. That the DOD is not the best at acquisition. It would be tactical. They wouldn't do strategic intelligence. In other words, the nation's mission wouldn't be served if I gave it up at that point. So again, this notion of owning your space, you now take the best person who knows the most, who is judging what the situation requires in terms of outcome, and you're the person that's making the argument. If you're just a sheeple, that can't happen, right? And a corollary to owning your space is spend no energy on things that aren't in your control. Spend no energy on whether your boss is good or not. Understand your boss. For goodness sakes, be an intelligence officer at your heart. I'm going to make you all intelligence officers. You know what the essence of an intelligence officer is? You see the world as it is, not as you prefer it to be. So see clearly who and what your boss is, but don't worry about whether they're good or not. They're your boss. Figure out how you own your space in that environment, right? Because that's what we don't do as often as we need to. It's why as leaders you delegate as much as you can, as early as you can, because if you hold all the work and the decisions to yourself, you're the least qualified person doing it. And you won't get innovation, and you won't be doing your job, which is to make sure that whatever they do can't hurt them. You want to hear my best failure story? Okay, so lead into that is, what's your greatest failure and what have you learned from it is my favorite interview question. I find that it falls into 3 categories when you get an answer. The first one is, I never failed. Do not hire that person because they're either a sociopath or they live their life on the bunny slope. You don't want them. By far, most people say, well, I failed, but it wasn't my fault. Don't hire that person. Hire the person that goes, oh my gosh, which one should I choose? So here's which one should I choose? I was at GS10. My boss came to me and said, we need a new way to get data back from a clandestinely placed source for the first time ever in real time. Before that, we'd run really dangerous missions to place it, and then 6 months later, really dangerous missions to go get the tapes to know what was being said. But technology had advanced, so we thought we could do it using satellites in real time, and they came to a GS10, who, by the way, had a degree in zoology, and said, in 6 months, I'd like you to come up with an answer to this problem that costs less than $3 billion. And I'll give you $50 million to go figure it out. God, those were the heyday. I mean, how is this possible? And think about how good the boss had to be to give me this job. So I did, and I went off as a young engineer will do, and I came up with a brilliant solution with the help of 3 companies. And the smallest of the 3 companies came up with the best answer. It was only 2/3 of it cost $600 million. It was going to work brilliantly. And I was so excited, and he was excited. And they said, I'm ready to go. And I said, yeah, the only problem is you're not a big enough company, so we're not going to be able to give you $300 million. We'll pair you with somebody. And I didn't even understand why that was probably not the thing to say directly to a contractor from the government. So here's what happens the very next day. I get a call from the head of the National Reconnaissance Office, the one I just didn't give, 30 years later, didn't give away. That's funny, I hadn't thought about that. And he said, I don't know who the heck you think you are, but I've learned about your little project and it will never happen. Your stupid, arrogant CIA should never be in the space business, and I'm getting you out of it. The Air Force people that have worked with you, they've already been fired. It will never happen. Bam. While I was on the phone, I'd gotten a message from the president of a small company. Now, Jim always made me feel good. He was just a hero of mine. And so I decided to take the call because I didn't want to cry. And he said, Sue, great news. I sold my company last night, so we're ready to accept the contract. Let that sit on you. Because a 26-year-old thought that the work turned on the brilliance of the technical solution. I had done nothing to work stakeholders. I had been indiscreet with information. And this guy who trusted me to be good at my job had sold his life's work because I said it was going to happen. I know you can't believe I'm standing in front of you. You're saying you are not the luckiest woman in the world. And I don't know why you're optimistic. Surely the people that work with you are not. So what do I do? What do I do next? Those two things have just happened. What would you do if you were in that circumstance? Oh, well, the next thing you do is, nice answer, very clever. You go to your boss. My goodness, you must present yourself. When you screw up, you must present yourself for flogging. You just went. So I went to my boss and I said, this happened. And you know what he said? And it changed my life. He said, oh, I've seen worse. Now, it didn't mean it wasn't bad. It's just he was so good at what he did that he created the room for me to be innovative, to come up with a solution that he never would have come up with, and knew that there was no failure that I could do for which he couldn't recover. And then he didn't take the work away. He kicked me back into play, and I'm so embarrassed because I wasn't very good at my job that I became better. And then as a boss, I became a boss who could always tell my people, I've seen worse. So own your space regardless of where you are. 2 more leadership lessons, then I'll shut up and take your questions. Always remember that you might be the jerk. When I'm not with friends, I'll usually say, if you're righteous, you're wrong. Right? We know righteous people, and they can't take right. They need their thing. So here's my story about you might be the jerk. I have a friend of mine who loves fudge stripe cookies. You know what fudge stripe cookies are? They're Keebler cookies, shortbread, a little bit of chocolate on the bottom. She was going on a trip to Australia, and she was an ops officer, and so anyone she sat next to, she was always judging, were they going to be a recruited asset, a friend, or someone she was going to shun. Right? That's her worldview. Right? And so she gets in this flight, and she has herself all prepared for the trip, and she's in business class, which is like, oh my gosh, this is great. And she pulls out her water bottle and her book and her fudge stripe cookies, and she opens them up and she sets them gently on the side, getting ready for takeoff. Guy comes and sits next to her. She kind of nods. She's not going to commit to what he is yet. And even before takeoff, you won't believe what happens. He takes one of her fudge stripe cookies. And she didn't yet want to give up on the recruited asset, and so she decided that her course of action was to take one and eat it, so that he clearly was messaged, these are my cookies. Anyway, they take off. She's got her headphones on, listening to her music with her book. She's kind of reading the same line over and over. He eats a second one. Okay, now he's in the shun category because he can't be trusted, and she again takes the cookie, her cookie out, bites it. You won't believe what happens next. He takes the next cookie, and there are only 6 in the pack, and then he picks it up and offers it to her, like, do you want the last one? And she can't believe, she's fuming the whole way. 17 hours to Australia, she's just losing her mind. Losing her mind. They land, she gets up, she gets her bag out to put everything back in. She unzips her bag. What's in the top of her bag? Her fudge stripe cookies. She was eating his. So as a leader, anytime you're doing something, be really open to the idea that no matter how carefully honed your vision is, it may not be quite right. And then the last thing I'll offer before I take a question, actually 2 the last things. One is, I think my magic has always been that I believe. I always believed that I was supposed to do the job given me. And when you believe that, then the obstacles you face are undaunting because you must do it, that you were supposed to do that job. Think about the women and men, and I don't know where all of you are in your careers, sitting in government agencies right now, faced with the uncertainty they have, not knowing what's going to happen, but they still own some space and time. Whether it's going to be the right place for them in the future, who knows? Everyone has to decide for themselves, and we can talk about how you make those decisions. But they do have space and time. Do something with it. If you lead humans, there is a burden that comes when they believe in you, because if you aren't good enough, if you don't have enough integrity, the damage you will do to them is far greater than a jerk will do to them. But working for someone who believes and who knows that as a leader you brought yourself but you were never about yourself, they will join in with you. If you make mistakes, it will only be mistakes. And the best thing is they won't become cynical, because cynicism is just protection against disappointment. So these are amazing times. They are times that require you to think about how you can do the same thing differently. That doesn't mean throw away rules. That just means account for the rules differently. Think about how you minimize risk, not in the way we used to, but the way we did it. And then whether you're leading yourself or whether you're leading other humans, do so in a way that is true, transparent, responsible, and believe, and we'll get through this together. I have a couple poems that I refer to when I'm losing my way, and trust me, I've had a set of times when I walked out of the Oval Office last time, I had to figure out how I was true to myself and manage the situation. And I got a couple poems. You might want to think about something that's your touchstone for hard times, because in hard times, it is only about who you are. Right? Focusing on who they are just doesn't work. Mine is the poem If. My dad read it to me. I read it to my children read it. It's by Rudyard Kipling. It has a bunch of great couplets in it. The one I mostly use, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. Followed closely by, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, and if you can force yourself to hold on with all your heart and nerve and sinew and have them serve their tune long after they're gone, then the world is yours and all that's in it. So for me, that reminds me who I am when I want to be petulant. And when I want to do something like call the press and get them to see this thing that's going on, because I need to be saved. Another one, and this may be the best one, from Finding Nemo, Dory. Keep on swimming, swimming, swimming. Just keep swimming. And with that, I'll turn the questions over to you. We could go on all day. I'm honored to be in your presence. I'm optimistic because of you. Hopes and dreams resting on your shoulder, and it's in good place being there. But make sure that you keep something for yourself, because times will consume you if you don't also know who you are. With that, I turn it over to you. Ask me anything.
Okay, I'm going to ask you anything, which is that I'm guessing that a whole bunch of people in the audience are thinking, oh, she's really amazing. I could never be like that. So, one of the things that happens to me frequently, and probably happens to other people in this room, is that I have dreams about finding myself in situations when I am totally and utterly unprepared.
Yes.
To do something really important that I have to do. So I'm really curious, do you have those dreams too? And if so, what do you do with them?
Yes, great question. And I don't know if I've ever been asked that way, so let's see if I can organize myself. I told you I've had a career getting jobs I had no idea to do. That's super scary, because I love being good. And I don't mean that in a small way. I was nervous about coming to talk to you because I wanted to be worthy of you and your time. So that's a big thing for me. But on that meta plane, over time, I convinced myself that the empiricist in me has been in this situation before, and it worked out okay. So I don't know that I've ever gotten over that. And I think in some ways I feel exactly the same way today as I did the day they gave me that task. Two of the things I have, but I put my nose down and learn. I pick my head up and see, and I remind myself that it's worked out okay in the past. A piece of that, there are circumstances when you will be in that moment, and what's difficult about it is not actually the creation of something new, but a really difficult circumstance of competing demands. I want to be good, and I can't bear to be here. I've been asked to do something and I don't think that thing is right. I'll give you two quick examples. One was I was the director of support when Benghazi happened. You all know Benghazi. Boy, that was awful because I lost some of my men, and we lost Chris Stevens, and we didn't see it coming. And the approach we took to it was ill-conceived. And had we been smarter about the security environment, we would have done different things. And so there was just a lot there. In the media, the press was killing us early on because they said the CIA didn't come fast enough to the State Department's defense. We were just getting killed. And so Dave Petraeus, who was the relatively new director of Central Intelligence, Mr. CENTCOM, big ideas, first to the truth, don't really believe in the secrecy thing, said, I know what we're going to do. We're going to call 20 reporters in and we're going to tell them everything that happened. Like everything that happened. And as the director of support security worked for me, they said, ma'am, we know you have this meeting. You can't let them do it. You can't let them tell everything that happened. We can't give up our global posture. We can't give up how we can do security. It will be bad. And so, like a boss, I go represent my women and men's work. And I feel a bit like Pete Longstreet telling Lee that Pickett's charge wasn't going to work. But I go into the office, I lay my story out, and he says, no, we're going to do it anyway. Go back to my guys, and I said, no, we're going to do it anyway. And they said, oh, no, let me give you more data to make the argument better. And I go back in, and I have more data, and I give the argument better. We are sure. We're like, he doesn't understand secrecy. He doesn't understand that we're the CIA. We don't give oxygen to a fire. We let it play out. We can take it. We're tough. They can say this about us. It's okay. We can do it. Sue marches back in. Sir, we're going to do this. She said, Sue, I hear you. We're going to do it. I go to bed that night. The next day is 20 reporters. I go in, and he's sitting there, and so is David Ignatius. And they said, hey, not only, and I'm ready with a new argument because I thought about it all night. I clearly wasn't good enough, right? I was doing the truth to power thing. And he said, no, we're going to do it. By the way, you're going to be there. And you're going to be part of it. We did it. You know what happened? First news report came out, told exactly what happened, and not one more word about the CIA not showing up. Now, other things happened with Benghazi because it was the first of a modern politicized event. But that issue of security and our reputation, the CIA's, it went away. So I hate the words truth to power because it suggests that truth is variable and that power doesn't want to hear it, but I understand what it means. It says, hey, saying hard things to a boss that may not want to hear it. I did it 3 times, and he rebuffed me each time. So my lesson is sometimes power is right. And people will say, people will say, would you do it the same way knowing the outcome? And the answer is yes, I needed to play my role. Because if I had just capitulated to what he wanted without saying, what if he really didn't know, he wasn't quite certain, and I hadn't offered that opinion? So this notion of everyone playing your job, it's that beautiful tension of perfect antagonism that makes things. So that's why you have to do it. And then we could talk about how I dealt with being bounced out of public office, if you want to. And it's again, and Nancy, it's all the same thing. Is I really do believe that you have to know who you are, because how you handle circumstances really depends on kind of your morals, values, what's important to you. And because it isn't really about yourself, even though you have to know yourself, then you have to think of your responsibilities. And so that's kind of the way I navigate those circumstances. I just revert to what I know, and then I look at what is true and in front of me, and then I find a new path forward. And I think it's not a bad equation because we all have those skills to do it that way. You could do that with any difficult situation you are. Who am I? What's the circumstance? What are my responsibilities? The path is there. The only codicil to that I would offer is, if you don't know what to do, keep on walking till you do. Don't be so uncomfortable in uncertainty that you just will resolve the uncertainty by just doing anything. A bad decision is a bad decision. Anyway, great question.
Do you want to take questions?
I love questions.
Okay. Do you want to handle them yourself, or do you want me to call people? I
Oh.
think you like to be in charge. So.
No, I'm perfectly fine, because actually, you know what I was thinking? I'm thinking, well, she knows all the people in this room, so I'll let you be in charge.
Okay. Who's got something they want to ask Sarah?
Yes, so thank you so much for everything, for the talk and everything. Perfect timing, I feel like, in my life getting this. You say that the biggest problem right now the US faces is not believing in ourselves. And I want to point you like straight to like me of like, I am the problem, because this is something that I struggle with a lot. So it's more of like a personal, quite vulnerable question, because during this time, finding myself, how then do I believe in the US? Especially you talk about there's distances between countries, and we're bridging the distance. But then for me, and upbringing, this also means bridging the differences between countries themselves.
Right.
So it's a lot of struggle of, believing in ourselves, wanting maybe to believe in the ideas of patriotism, but
Right.
not nationalism, but also the nation state, and trying to put one people's first before other people's, and still doing good work. I'm struggling with a lot of these issues right now, and so I wonder.
You and 350 million people, I hope.
Right. So.
No, I hope everyone's struggling with this moment, right?
Yeah. So how have you managed this at different points in your life? How can you maybe help me figure out? I want to believe, but it's just difficult.
So we're going to be at different places in our life. So it's back to this notion of whatever space you have. Different people have different domains and different things that they can affect. So the things I can think about doing right now, so I'm toying with the idea of, do I have to announce that I'm running for president in 2028, because we are not having conversations that are worthy of the American people. And to my point about making just only two bad choices, maybe I just need to talk about things in a way that says, oh my gosh, to the American people, that there's something else we can do rather than one of these two choices. So that's something that is available to me. Do I need to leave my public company boards? Because my public company boards hate it when I go on TV, even though I'm really mindful of not being over political, but they hate it. But can I bear not saying something, since I think I have things that need to be said? Am I really willing to give up all my income in order to do this, and would it make a difference? So all those things, I can think that because of the things I've done, but you can think the same thing, you just have a little bit smaller domain. I'd start with, do I see the situation clearly? I spend a lot of time making sure that my bias and my worldview and what I think is right is as exposed to me as I can make it. So as far as news, I listen to it. I try not to listen to people telling me what it is. I really look for things that are different, because I want to see this. I don't want to just be mad at it. I want to see it. I want to know it. I'm worried about it. Well, you can do that too. The second thing is, I think most of the solution right now for all of us is to start local, right? Local is where we have the most trust. Local is where we have the most in common. And local is where we can start having conversations that bring about the kind of changed attitude and the connectedness and the inclusion that we need in order to, as a nation, take it on. If you're in the work, so that's just as a human traveling in society. If you're in the workplace, what's your job? How does that job apply to the challenges we have and the sources of discontent that the American people articulated? And the world situation, what is unclear? Do I have a piece of my job that is relevant? So I just try and really bring it wherever I am, but it always, to me, starts with seeing it and then going back. So this idea of bouncing higher to find something that I understand and then dive lower to see what I can affect is my way of having some power in a moment that feels really powerless to me too. So you and I think about it differently, but I hope you just heard me say, I don't know. I don't know what to do right now. I'm as flummoxed, but I am working to figure out what is available to me, what I would have to do in order to avail myself of that, and then decide if I can bear the cost, and ultimately for me, whether it would make a difference. But I don't think the average bear can look at the situation, the meta situation, whether that is somehow magically the United States seems to be on the side of Russia, which is anathema for all of us, or my colleagues and dearest friends in the media are being labeled as corrupt, fraudulent, and dumb, or whether that's when I talk to my neighbors in Cold Spring, Texas, they are so far away from any of these conversations that I either have to find a way to speak in a different lexicon to be able to touch them or shun them because I can't bear it. And so I think that what I would offer you is start with what you own, spend a lot of time seeing what is, and then figure out what you can affect. And it doesn't mean that you can only affect where you are. You can say, well, I need to get to this place so that I can affect more, back to my leadership point. It's really hard, but you can affect some things. All of us can affect some things. I think what's harder when I listen to my children now, they are so capable and so smart and can do so many things, but the thing they want to fix is well beyond their abilities to fix it. They just haven't done enough or haven't got enough to fix it all the way to the top, but that's where they see it because they're so erudite as Gen Z and Gen A are. It's amazing. But it's almost harmed you because you see all the big and you think big is where you should operate. And the truth is, my first job at the CIA was rewriting NSA launch summary reports into plain English. You wouldn't deign to take that job. Without that job, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so just see big and then think about what you control. Do you buy it?
I mean, yes, I definitely have always been more local politics oriented. And so thinking about that, I guess US as a local extension of us as global players could maybe help situate myself as this rift between a US citizen and a
Yeah.
global citizen.
A couple things on that. I missed that part of it. I didn't address it. Listen, I think it's totally legitimate to be America first. 2025 in a digitally connected world dominated by the forces I say, it cannot be America alone. It will not work. It cannot be that. So this is a weakness of mine. All our strengths are also our weaknesses. I always say, well, clearly if they understood what I understood, they would be able to see this. And so I spend a lifetime working to speak and introduce topics in a different lexicon so that I get a different conversation, so we open up more space rather than today, it's sides. And instead of forcing people to choose, what we need to do is understand. So I love your question. So one, I will offer that your sense that this issue of how we operate in a new global ecosystem is a really big one. Second thing I'll offer, my favorite person at the CIA once said this, and I love it. It says, all people think they're the good guys, right? And so opening up yourself to let go of some of our ethnocentricity in order to be able to find new space is another thing, actually, that I think people younger than me are going to be naturally better at because you're just doing that. So all those things are worthwhile. Factor them in. Maybe it's just, let's presume I want to affect that. What do I have to be good at in order to affect it? Not I want to jump to affecting it, because that's a big leap right now. But man, not being ethnocentric, and whether you're in technical fields or not, super important. Values driven, not implementation driven, and that's a big lesson that the US hasn't learned yet. We think partnership is I'll offer you protection and you'll do what I say. Yeah, no. Like, how's it working for us right now? Can't believe Zelensky's still holding on to his view of the world. And if I were talking to Zelensky, I'd say, can you really not see this? All right, so just be that person and keep on learning. But don't give up that you have some space that you can affect. It just may not be the outcome at the big level that you can affect.
So we probably have time for one more question. And Alec, I'm going to go with you.
I'll try and answer in a tweet so we get two.
Pardon?
I'll take 2 if I'll keep my answer to a tweet.
Okay, then you get second to last question.
It's kind of the flip side of that. I think that all the military
No,
officers.
I'm sorry.
I know, exactly. No, it's the what do we do when we're already in it? All the military officers I talk to right now are kind of going through this discussion of what hill do I die on, and where is it worth it to make a stink, right? And so your talk is really helpful, but I think that we also need a framework. So you said power can be right sometimes,
Okay.
but they're looking for this framework of like, when do I decide that being a part of the conversation and trying to get the best out of this is the wrong thing? And I do not think that's a framework many of us have. It's a challenging framework, and I'm just wondering if you have thoughts. Right, for the military.
Yeah, this isn't gonna be a tweet.
Yeah, but
I-
it's a framework
yeah.
for how we try to weigh the relative benefits, right? Is it worth it to go along so you gain the trust of people you disagree with, so you can change something in the end, right? Versus
I think, is that what the Republican senators are thinking right now?
yeah.
Right, like if you want to have a perspective on something that some people think they don't understand, I think you just super well stated it. Am I better off not being here or being here?
No, but it's like, yeah, exactly, right? And what's the framework? There's no way you can make the individual person.
So I'll give you
decision.
2
What's the
frameworks.
framework?
I'll give you 2 frameworks, and both of them are imperfect. Number 1 is, for me, swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, and the Constitution of the United States prescribes a president. The Constitution does not say the president has to be good or right. And this is anyone that falls, I'm not speaking about this particular, anyone that falls in that category. So to me, that construct, and military officers, that construct is super helpful to say, I don't agree with it. I don't even think it's right, but it is constitutional, and therefore I can go on that path. What is the interesting challenge is when it diverges from what you think is constitutional, what do you do then? That is not easy, but it is one that I used. There. That was not the reason why I ended up being asked to leave. It's because I was deep state. You all do know there's no deep state, right? Because we couldn't organize ourselves. That's why don't get excited about the don't get too excited about the JFK files. Seriously, he acted alone because we couldn't keep that secret. Not a chance. So that's one, and I have found it useful, and it actually is useful even without the Constitution. It says it is a legitimate decision my boss is making. Not right or wrong. Don't look at decisions whether they're right or wrong. Look at it whether it's a legitimate decision and where you are if it's theirs to make. So that's one. The second one is, who are you? What is your standard? What can you bear as an individual to do? And that's going to be different for different people. I would tell you, if you're working for someone who wants you to be less, run away. No one who's worthy should ever want anyone to be less than they are, want less than your opinion, even if you're offering the counter opinion. So, but that's me. And both are legitimate. And the only thing I would offer is everyone has a line in the sand. If you've done anything at all, you've faced a line in the sand, you've decided to cross your line, just make sure it's worth it. When I'd been married 2 weeks, my very adorable husband said something that perturbed me, and so I drove out of the house. And 2 blocks away from the house, I realized I was going to go back in. That was a dumb line in the sand, right? So when you get to that moment of having to make decision, ask one more time whether, because you get to make that choice, but you don't get to have an input on the consequence. So those are the frameworks that I use to do it is, does it fit with what's legitimate? Can I bear it possibly? And then I think twice to make sure I'm not just being righteous. But this is a really hard moment. I would not have left, even though I disagreed with a lot, maybe until January 6th. And here's an interesting thing. If I had been asked to come back, I probably would have, because the government needs good people that are trying to do good things. I think for the military, this is really hard, but I think it is a framework you can use. You're not going to let me take another question.
I have not, because I knew Alec was gonna ask you a wonderful question and a thought-provoking question, and we would all love to stay and talk with you for hours, but there's another class that's literally.
Yikes.
on board, so,
And they can take us? I'm saying I've got a team here. I've got a team here. I might be able to.
always in here if we didn't get.
Thank you so much. Hopes and dreams on your shoulders.